Thanks for the invitation. So I have to start by confessing that Canada doesn't have a formal orphan drug regulation, and it's really sad to say that. I have dedicated a lot of my time to trying to correct that, and I've been working with the Europeans and in the States. There's a wonderful, mature international structure, and that's good because if we're coming late to the game, we can get the design right by looking at other jurisdictions, and that's what we're trying to do. So as we're working on our framework, we're trying to make sure that we designate orphan drugs well, that we are able to sort of keep in line with the set that is chosen by Europe and the States and other colleague regulators. The important part of the design also needs to include patient input in Canada. So nationally, we're making sure that we're working well. The main trick for us, though, is how we move something from the federal level out into the market so it's received well by our provincial and other payers so that there's good uptake. And this is where, even though we're late to the game, we might be able to offer a few insights. We were working on models of early entry for compounds, not necessarily orphan, but compounds out into our environment. So you're moving from that question about, do we let this drug out into the market? Is the benefit exceeding the risk to that extent? To the question that the provinces ask, because there are payers, we have private plans, but there's public payment. They're asking, is this drug valuable to buy? And there's evidence needed for both. There's a process needed for both. But because we moved out an early policy and didn't consult with the provinces, this had some jagged edges to it. So when we initially approved drugs out in the market with obligations for more study, so we were talking about registries and other kinds of observational data you can bring in, the provinces sat down and asked, well, wait a minute, what is it we're getting? Is the drug that we're buying right now really approved? Or what does it mean that there are uncertainties? How are you resolving them? Is that okay? It's a really important discussion. It's a discussion that has to be held, especially in this area, because there are going to be uncertainties as we move drugs out. So we learned early on that we need to sit down with our provincial partners and make sure as we're designing the laws federally to let the drugs out and putting commitments in there that people understand what that means. Who's paying for the data? Who accesses it? Which questions are we going to ask federally? What's going to be asked provincially? How does that line up? Is it going to be so burdensome that nobody's going to get a meaningful answer to those questions? Is it going to be timely? So there's a lot of questions sitting in the design that we need to talk about together. So we can use the international structure to sort of set up how a drug will come in the investigational context, setting up clinical trials. But that really important step as to when something goes from us out into the treatment context, and then we see it being used live in the medical community, how do we keep our hand on that situation? How do we work well with our counterparts out in the provinces where they're gathering really good data? We have excellent provincial databases that we could really use well if we get our act together. So really, I guess the point that I would try to leave you with is that as we design, we're trying to keep this well in mind. There are other issues that go along with it, like exclusivity. You don't want have a well-planned study by our company or a couple of companies, and then generics to swoop in at the wrong time because you can have attrition, the study can fall down, and so on. So there are those issues. There are privacy issues that we have to coordinate. But that really essential middling discussion about how a drug really achieves market in Canada to the important patients, that's the one that we're putting in the middle of the discussion. And I think from what I've heard just in the short time I've been here, that's a really important conversation because the validity of this information itself is called into question. It's hard to get effectiveness data. It's hard to coordinate it. So if we're going to wire in a law that says by law you have to get the data, you've got to know you can fulfill that request. So anyway, that's, we're not finished the discussion by any means, but we think that that's an important thing that we can bring in through Canada. The other thing is we're trying to make sure that we're working with our academic centers to make sure that we have the people qualified to do this kind of surveillance and the capture of data. It's, again, it's tricky. We don't have enough epi people in Canada. We don't have enough experts. So we're working really hard to make sure that our curricula and anything that we can do to make this evidence gathering better, we're trying to do. It's not just about wiring in a law, although that will clearly help. So it's really taking those lessons that we've learned from early entry and making sure that where we've got uncertainties, especially with a drug coming into market for the first time, how we resolve them, what the legal structure says about resolving them is a really important discussion. Our provinces are making some headway. We are as well. We have a new network set up, our Drug Safety and Effectiveness Network. They're set up to ask and answer questions for both us and our provinces. So it's a new institution. It's about 2 years old, and they're making some good ground as well. So I know we're short on time, so I'll just leave it there. Thank you.